Welcome to Peacebuilding Initiatives with José Barzola. Peacebuilding Initiatives are collaborative ways of developing healthy, positive relationships via dialogue, cross-cultural understanding, exploring ways to shift our own perspective to build compassion and empathy within our communities. Thank you for joining us today. On today's episode, we have Alex Williamson, who is an undergrad at UH Manoa, getting his bachelor's in women, gender, and sexuality studies, where he has thrived academically with the help of scholarships like the Woe Family Foundation and the Charles R. Hemingway Scholarship and the Chesney Ling Women's Studies Scholarship, to name a few. Originally from South Carolina, Alex moved to Hawaii at 21 to work with honeybees on the farm. Uh, Sparking his passion for sustainable agriculture, he has been actively involved in student government at his alma mater, Leeward Community College, serving as a ASUH president from 2021 through 2023 and vice chair of the University of Hawaii Student Caucus in 2023. He graduated from Leeward with honors in 2023. Alex currently works for Love Pono, the Violence Prevention Sexual Assault Awareness Committee at Leeward Community College. Alex is in his senior year of his undergrad and is part of the UH Manoa Honors Program with goals of working in higher education and advocating for marginalized communities. His honors thesis is a portfolio including a printed poetry anthology with local writers called Flows, Intersecting Currents of Queer Feminism. And there's so much more I can say about Alex, but I want to make sure we get to our conversation today.
Pretty good.
You're
That was
I mean, honestly, your journey is truly inspiring. From early work with honeybees to your academic pursuits in social sciences and advocacy, you've clearly made a significant impact in both the higher education campus and beyond the local community. Your commitment to helping underrepresented students and your leadership roles in student government are also really commendable. As someone currently as a higher ed professional, um, I welcome you and I look forward to, having you continuing to collaborate with you in this field. And I know that you will be a wonderful resource and assistance to our student population. So thank you. Thank you for all you've done. And I know all the wonderful things you will continue to do. But with that being said, I'm going to turn it over to you in case there's any words you want to share. Otherwise, we'll kind of get the conversation going.
sure. Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. Just have to say off the bat, it's definitely very interesting being on the other side of the interview. We've had Jose on the podcast a couple of times with Love Pono. As you said, that's the Violent Prevention and Sexual Assault Awareness Committee at Leeward Community College. Um, we focus on a lot of issues that are near and dear to my heart, my passion, my platform. We don't just we hope. Well, I guess I should backtrack. We have a podcast, and so that's what I'm referring to, saying that I'm on the other end of it. Normally, I host that. And on our podcast, we don't just focus on violence prevention necessarily, but more how different community efforts and an aspect of like mental health or what's going on campus, different resources that are available, how they interplay to how people view violence prevention, especially uh, it's the excused violence that's sort of around them, and maybe they don't have the words for it. That's kind of what we're here for, is kind of open up that conversation, similar to the work you do. We're really inspired by you and what you've just done with your podcasts, your YouTube show, all the different Zoom presentations that you've been a part of, and dialogues have been really, really inspiring to us at Love Pono. And then just on a personal level, Jose, you've just been really inspiring to me in general, just working in higher education, being out there, networking really well, and just kind of making important topics known, and your correspondence. It's just great. So I'm grateful to be here on the other end, and
Thank you, Alex.
yeah, I'm,
Thank
I'm
you.
thankful for this conversation. So I'm ready to talk about anything you want to talk about.
It's tough to get away from that moderating chair. It's such you're such a
Yeah.
natural.
Yes, I'm
Well,
sure.
as I took a deep dive into your bio, one thing that truly, the honeybees. So you
Mhm.
moved to Hawaii at 21 to work with
Mhm.
honeybees.
Yeah.
Could you share a little bit about what was the transition like and what drew you to sustainable agriculture in the first place?
Sure, sure. It's just funny because I mean, I feel like at this point, I'm kind of in a different era of my life, if you will, which we'll get to, and I'll kind of get to in my story. But I still love the honeybees, love nature, love the work I did. Don't have bees at the moment, but I wish I did. But I'm sort of possibly in a transition period of my own, looking at grad schools and things like that. So maybe not the right time to open it into go back into that. But yeah, backing it up a lot. It was 2013. I moved here from South Carolina. I was 21. I it all kind of started with me wanting to get out of South Carolina. And, not to get too deep too quick, but it was a lot of like social political things going on, my entire life. Kind of especially growing up as a queer person and in the 90s in the South. It was a different time. I mean, obviously we're still dealing with a lot of pushback in regards to maybe unique or anything that's not cis white hetero way of living. So unfortunately, we're getting a little bit of a drawback in acceptance and equality for sure. I'll say, but then it was even more so. More specifically, just to kind of give a tangible example. I was involved in South Carolina. I was involved in a workplace discrimination case that wouldn't have been possible in certain states like Hawaii or California or other places that sort of included LGBTQ people in as someone who's able to be discriminated against. It was really weird wording. It changed a couple years later. Federally, LGBTQ people are protected in the workplace, but I got a quick lesson in states' rights uh, at that moment. I was like 20, and so I was these various things that happened to me. Again, I'll get into more of my past later and kind of what I do with my passions and what I've sort of done with sort of trying to pull myself up a bit by my bootstraps, if you will. Never really letting things get me too down, more finding a practical solution, trying to find out what's next, trying to move forward, right? And so for me, that was getting out of South Carolina. That was escaping a lot of hate I experienced, a lot of trauma, and just various instances of unfortunate circumstances. And for me, instead of just staying there sad, I said, how can I move away as far as I can, essentially? And so I started looking at different work trade programs all over the world, really. Um, I was at one point very interested in going to South Africa, working with penguins. It was a whole thing. But yeah, somehow I found the WOOF program, the Worldwide Options for Organic Farmers, and I started looking into Hawaii. I think Hawaii appealed to me because it was pretty much as far as I could get away from South Carolina without having to worry about work visas or at that point I didn't even have a passport. Again, like the way I grew up, my family, we traveled. We went to Disney World. I'm very grateful. We did some cool traveling growing up, don't get me wrong. But, leaving the coast, let alone, going over an ocean was just unheard of for my family. Like it just wasn't something we did. We just didn't, I wasn't taught it was practical to travel, and that's fine. I think a lot of people that's a comfort for them to maybe think of stepping outside of their box or what they know. And I understand that, but it wasn't for me. For me, I know I needed to get outside of um the environment I was raised in. I needed to sort of see what else was out there. I needed to branch out. And yeah, so
Yeah.
long story short, I was woofing, or excuse me, I was looking at the Woof website and I narrowed it down between two farms
Yeah.
to work at. One was on Oahu and one was on Hawaii Island on South Point Road. And if you're familiar with Hawaii Island and if you're familiar with South Point Road, that's a very isolated area. Um, Ka'u district is, I think, 80 miles, if not more, stretch with no stops lights or stop signs, It's a big, wide open country stretch of land. Um, for me, still, even though I was 21 and it was important to me to have a sort of plan, if you will. And so this opportunity involved like a beekeeping internship and trying to train to be a beekeeper. And I've always, I've been vegetarian since I was 10 years old, so I've always been in a sense, very ecologically minded and really kind of focused on the land and in various aspects. And this was a way to explore that. I'd done landscaping positions in South Carolina, but nothing like farm work. So this was a
Did
way
you
to
have a
explore.
background in farming at all?
Not at all. No, not at all.
So they
Just
trained you on the
they
spot, I
trained
guess.
me. Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, I worked again. I had a kind of a passion for like healthy eating, healthy lifestyle. So I worked in a
Yeah,
natural food store, and I learned a lot about the organic process through that, but nothing hands-on necessarily. But it
it's
had been
amazing.
it had encountered my life as a passion. But yeah, so it was you know I ended up doing a lot besides beekeeping. I ended up, working at coffee fields and macnut fields, husking, cracking, dehydrating, pulping coffee,
Yeah.
all sorts of that
I
stuff.
it just
Quintessential
occurs
farm.
to me because one of the latest conversations I've been hearing about in for some time now is like the farming industry is an aging industry.
Mm,
It's one where you don't see a lot of young folks are like, I want to be a farmer, for the
yeah,
rest of my life kind of thing.
yeah,
And so to hear about, how, and maybe that's part of like this program and how an opportunity to engage folks and
yeah.
to to continue the traditions that they've been doing. So, might you share how did your experience in the farm influence your current academic and career aspirations?
Yeah, I know they're so different. I mean, the in on paper, right? Like what I'm deciding to do now with my education and sort of, my work and in student life office at Leeward, being part of Love Pono. Um, I would say the ways that they intersect are kind of solely based off my actual experience at the farm, not farm work in general, if you will. But it was for this area, a pretty popular farm in a sense. Like there's not much to do on South Point Road. There was even less to do in 2013. And we offered a farm stand and we offered farm tours, and it was a very interactive way, a very it was what I left South Carolina for, to kind of venture out and learn about different cultures, different people, network, and that was the opportunity to do that. And I sort of really, looking back, I can see how it intersects with what I do now, because I started to really just be interested in humanity even more, and just interested in just the cultures all around me outside of the bubble that I left. You know, uh, just networking in general, learning, where the people live, how they live life, how they do a job in this place. Like, I would say that's what I got the most out of that experience, as well as because, again, it was that sort of like work trade opportunity. I was in every situation is different, but my situation, I was placed in a house essentially, or earlier in our conversation earlier before we were recording, we were talking about the real world, and it was very similar to that. So aging both Jose and I, if you folks don't know what we're talking about with the real world, but so it was, and I never had gone to college, which I'll kind of probably get into later, but or I tried to go to college. It was semester. It was a bust. And right when I was 18. But so I never had that experience, that dorm experience, never really had that kind of branching out, living with other people, learning about different folks and that sort of experience. And that was that. And so I think that kind of shaped, what I've become now too, in a lot of ways. Just kind of gauged my interest in just people, I guess. And then, that kind of opens up the door for a lot of different interests career wise or academic wise. Um, there's a lot to be done with an interest in people. How do you want to help people? Do we want to work with people? We want to find out more about people, and and why they do the things they do. Yeah, I think in that way, that's how it's connected, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you so much. I so you had a very unique experience through Leeward's accelerated online
Mhm.
program. I just want to give homage to Leeward since for those who get to not listen to this but get to watch this on YouTube, he's got the Leeward
Right.
um, virtual background right there. So I want to make sure we touch upon Leeward since it is a portion of your journey. How did you balance the demands of coursework with your involvement also with like student government, as we read in your bio, and other leadership roles?
Sure. You know, I guess it would be a disservice to the story to not just I have to kind of go a little bit back in a way, but so during the pandemic, obviously there was a lot of unknown for a lot of folks. What's next for a lot of folks? It was definitely a time of transition. At that time, I found myself realizing, actually it took me a little bit into my educational journey, but I wasn't happy in life, and I realized it was because of an abusive relationship that I was in at that moment. Um, Going to school,
Sorry.
deciding to go to school, uh, was such a smart decision, smarter than I knew at that time. I knew it was smart just because I knew I was doing something for myself. Again, we were coming out of a pandemic barely. This was January 2021 was my first semester. This is the spring 2021. So, everything was transitioning in so many ways. And I just knew I wanted to focus on myself, better myself. And I saw this accelerated program, and I saw you could do it. They were advertising that you could do it if you were still working, one class at a time, 5-week courses. Yes, intense, but if you're able to devote your time to one subject, it's possible. And I just loved it. I loved it so much. You know, Eventually, as I was saying, like I started to realize the situation I was in wasn't healthy in many ways. And it was very attached to just my life out here in Kau. Again, things are very isolated. So I didn't have any other community really besides what was attached to that abusive and toxic relationship, essentially. And so going to school kind of broadened that community in so many ways. I met so many great folks. I ended up meeting Lexer Cho, who is the student life director at Leeward, and I don't know what it was that struck me to reach out to her and ask about student government, but I did, and I found out that I could do student government remote even though I'm on Hawaii Island. And so I joined student government. I got involved in a lot of different committees, started networking even more, started realizing, hey, I really like this higher education thing way more than I thought I would. I really like the way that it sounds so cheesy, but I say it all the time, like the way that kind of what higher education professionals' goals are. The good ones, no, I'm just kidding. They're all great. The reason that I think people have this passion in higher education is to make people's dreams come true. And I think that's such a beautiful position to be in, to be like, hey, we have the resources to give you what you want to do what you need to do. That's another way to say we want to make your dreams come true. Like, so I was sort of realizing that I was like, wow, this is a way, I've always wanted to work with people. I've always wanted to give back. This is a way to really kind of do that on a um, practical position, and a way to actually kind of, give myself accountability and make sure I'm giving back just as, especially to Hawaii, I feel it felt for me good, moving here, not knowing anything about Hawaii before I moved here at all. Again, I only moved here because I wanted to get away from South Carolina, but I learned so much about the culture, learned not only politically, but just culturally too. I just felt safer, as a queer person in general. And I just felt like I owe so much, especially as someone who moved here, especially as a settler. I felt like I want to give back in some way. And so joining the school, being able to be a part of student government, being able to be kind of behind the scenes and all of that, I was like starting to see how I could actually practically give back to various communities in Hawaii. Um, as well as just continue to educate myself about them, which I think is important as well. And so, yeah, I mean, eventually that role, transitioned into working with Love Pono. Obviously, like I said, I was in a toxic situation, so it was something that resonated with me quite closely. As well as another reason I said I would get to it later, and I think this is an appropriate time. One of the reasons I was having an issue with kind of where I was in South Carolina is because I actually am a survivor of sexual abuse. So again, working with Love Pono has been such a dear and just amazing opportunity because I'm able to help people who have gone through similar things as me who are feeling in a similar place that I've been, in my youth, just very lost and not with any resources. I would say one of the reasons college didn't quite work out for me when I was 18 was because I was still dealing with this trauma from, my teenage assault. And I had a like less trust in institutions because of that situation. So it just took me a while to kind of get myself out of that. But I think everything happens for the right reason. I wouldn't have, yes, I had all these things, this trauma happened to me, and I came out on the other end. I just kept going. But not only that, again, with timing, I don't know if I would have been able to connected with Love Pono if everything hadn't happened the way it had happened. And you know, eventually as I, further my career, if I do stay in higher education or if I do put a more like social services type position, no matter what, I'm always going to have this background and this opportunity that really kind of helped me escape a life I
Yeah.
wasn't happy living. So gosh, I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, no, thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you
yeah,
so
yeah,
much for, well, one, uh, thank you for just your honesty, humility, and just being so open about your journey. I know it's not easy. I'm so sorry that you had that experience, but here you are, thriving today. I think one of the things that's important is modeling also.
yeah.
So I know just by you existing, you you're not only pushing against the grain, you're there as an advocate, you're there as someone that the community can, who may not, folks out there who may not necessarily feel comfortable opening up about their own journey that they may, because when it's too soon, it's too soon. So I thank you for just being so open about that and being a
Sure.
space for folks, because I think that, yeah, we just need more people to be able to um, bring these issues to light so that we, rest assured, do not continue this. It's just
100%.
yeah. So thank you, and thank you
Yeah.
for weaving it. Honestly, don't don't worry. You more than answered the question. So
Okay,
you're like
cool.
referring to that. I do want
Perfect.
to shift a little to you're pursuing a degree in women's gender sexuality studies here at UH Manoa. I can see how it relates, but maybe I don't know if you want to share with our listeners how does this feel interests intersect with your advocacy work and your passion for sustainability?
Sure. Yeah. Great questions. I'm going to try to make sure I get to two parts 'cause I think it is important to tie it into sustainability as well. Um, I do want to say, just sorry to backtrack, but I just do want to say in general, thank you for what you just said. Before you led to this question, I do think if anyone's listening and is struggling with similar situations, I do think if you can, it's important to share. That's something that therapists have suggested to me, just based off the very fact that we can reverse our trauma by talking about it, by being open about it. We are removing stigmas and we are reframing it in our mind. If I'm able to talk about what happened to me but I wasn't, when I was 14, 15, when it was happening, I wasn't able to. But I'm able to talk about it now, because I know that I've it's helped me overcome a lot of things because of it. Of course, I'm not grateful it happened by any means, but again, it's just part of my journey. Kind of it's important to talk about these things, reframe it. Um, and also, again, with the stigmas attached to it, the more we talk about these things, the less stigmas there are, and then we can actually get some change done. So I just want to go back to your question. Sorry about that. Um, but yeah, so I remember taking my first women's gender and sexuality course at Leeward actually with Professor Jane Bopp. It was wonderful. And I've always and I guess I can go ahead and directly tie it into sustainability now because again, I've always had a more of a natural pathic mindset or been really interested in like a healthy lifestyle, that sort of thing. Um, and I think women's gender sexuality studies intersects with the land in many ways. I think the number one comparison, everyone knows what Mother Earth means, right? And I think that, how we treat Mother Earth, how, we can even think of it in Hawaiian cultural context, Pele, and just these entities around us are feminine in many contexts and in many traditions and stories. And I think that it goes hand in hand when you see folks who don't treat the earth well, but they also don't treat people well. And I think that I think that's kind of what feminism, in my opinion, teaches folks is that it's not feminism isn't just pay women right and treat women good and all that. I mean, that's a huge part of it, right? But feminism also includes how we treat each other, how we treat the earth, how we respond to certain societal structures, as well as uh, just respecting different cultures and including different ways of being in life. And I think that goes hand in hand with sustainability too. I think if you want to have a sustainable life in that regard, it's got to go all ways, right? Not saying, it's for everybody to necessarily get a women, gender, and sexuality studies degree. That's my passion, right? But I do think that feminism itself helps everybody, helps the communities around us, helps the land, in very direct ways. So hopefully that answered your question. Also, I've had the opportunity at UH. I'll give a shout out to the Wellbeing Project. It's an ecological belonging fellowship that I'm a part of. So in various ways, I've found ways to intersect kind of my passion for the environment and the communities that are in the environment with my education as well.
Thank you. Um, you've worked a lot to amplify opportunities for students in underrepresented areas, especially in Hawaii's isolated districts. What challenges do these students face, and how can possibly online education help bridge the gap or other platforms?
I love that question because, I think a lot of times people hear online education and they are just thinking, probably especially, at UH or at UH Manoa specifically, I'll just say, kind of just thinking, oh, they're in their dorms just taking the class and, they're at Manoa or they're on Honolulu. I think that's not considering how multifaceted the islands are, how expansive these opportunities should be. And also not to call it any institution, but when you look at the numbers and you look at how many people, and I was flown here. I mean, don't get me wrong. I was in many contexts. I'm not native by any means, but people who are, just applying to UH because, oh, it's in Hawaii and I'm gonna go, party in school in Hawaii and from, California, wherever on the mainland, coming over here. I feel like why is that's fine, don't get me wrong. But I feel like online education opens up this opportunity for people like me in Ka'u, for people like my neighbors in Ka'u, for people in Molokai, for people in various isolated districts, not just Honolulu, not just on Oahu, to actually get the same kind of education that is afforded to folks who do live in those big city areas of Oahu, who do live in those more developed areas. I think that it's an untapped potential that is not being focused on, and that's why I mentioned how many people are sort of being flown over to come to school when well again that's fine, but I think that if we did shift our focus to, wait, are there people actually in Hawaii who want these opportunities that were given people on the mainland, or that were taken for granted here, being in the city? Like, it's I've seen it. Like, being in Kau, it's just so interesting. I remember the first time I was at Leeward and I had a classmate who was like, "Hey, it's me," and it was someone who worked at the Ace in Naalehu. And so I just thought that was so interesting. And I think they were going to school for business. And I saw right then and there's this opportunity, especially, where I live. Again, I'm a settler, I'm not native. I don't have an expertise on this, but just from what I've seen, like there are folks in Kau, folks in Naalehu, folks in Pahala, folks in Ocean View who are kind of told, like this is where you're going to be. This is where you're going to work. There's the grocery store. There's the gas station. Take your pick. We're too far from Hilo. We're too far from Kona. You're not going to go to school there. You're not going to drive there every day for work. That's not practical for folks, right? And so opening up this door, having the same education that is afforded to folks who are, deciding to live in the city or born in the city or, however it works, giving that same education opportunity opens up so many doors. Again, this just untapped market. So I've personally gotten two of my neighbors to start at Leeward. I've connected them. I've helped them, got the set up their classes, which has been, fun for me as someone who's interested in higher education as a profession too, to sort of have that experience. But I'm just here to say that there are folks who want to be educated. They need the opportunity. And I'm so grateful for Lever for what they provided. Um, I'll just say, I mean, again, not to call it any institution, but I've actually had a lot more pushback in regard to online education at Manoa than Leeward. Leeward has really responded well to when I've brought these concerns up through various platforms, through student government, through Student Caucus, through speaking to the Board of Regents. Um, I've always felt very supported. And yes, Manoa is a much bigger institution, but there's been multiple times I've had to write into a professor or write into a department chair and be like, hey, like I'm actually in this online program and all of a sudden this class isn't available and like I need it for my degree. Just things I just didn't run into at Leeward. But I'll say this, I've always got my way. And I'm happy to say that proudly and obnoxiously because I hope it opens the door for other people too. It's not just about my way. It's about making these classes more accessible. And if I have to, be fussy about it, I'll do it very politely. And I'm really good at writing emails. So and nothing is rude in my methods, but I'm gonna get it done.
I I think it thank you. Thank you so much for sharing. And I think it goes beyond more of like you've gotten your way. It's more of you provided rationale to
Sure, sure.
uh, irrational times, basically.
Context.
Because sometimes it is, I think it's like, routine. It is routine. We do things a certain way and don't think of, oh, maybe we need to do something a little differently because we're not being inclusive of everyone. We're not truly thinking outside of the box. And that's
Yeah.
the problem with routine. Routine doesn't encompass outside the box thinking.
Yeah.
It's just comfortable. It's what
It's
we're
the
used
bubble.
to. Yes,
Yeah.
it's a bubble, the
Mm.
snow globe
And
effect,
that's
as we
fine. I'm
thought.
sure I
But
have various bubbles that still exist.
no, no, and no, and thank you for, just helping others, leaning to their discomfort. That's what I'm getting at.
Sure,
And
sure.
because that's part of the work that we do, trying to
Mm.
have those conversations and trying to shift systems that are not we're not made inclusive for everybody,
Mhm.
basically.
Mhm.
And so I do want to shift a little
Mhm.
to flows, if that's
Oh
okay,
yeah, yeah, please, yeah.
because I truly love that you. So so first off, like, what was your vision for flows as an anthology? Were there specific
Mm.
themes or objectives you had in mind when bringing together the writers? Like, so you basically had so. Don't let me take the words from your mouth, but from what you've explained, you had this idea and you're like, I'm going to make it happen. And you self-publish. And
Mm.
so, which is so inspiring for other folks. Once more, going
Mhm.
back to modeling, other folks who may have these ideas and maybe trying to go through normal systems. Once more, we don't have to go through normal systems to get
Sure. Yeah.
things done,
100.
or have, how other ways that we can get things done. So yeah, it's just if you could share a little bit, like what was your vision for flows, are there specific themes, objectives? How did you
Hmm.
navigate balancing diverse voices? I imagine, like, I
Hmm.
mean, it is a beautiful compilation that you put together. Um, but at the same time, it's limited in the amount of, no, it's not an encyclopedia here. It's
Hmm. Hmm.
just a few pages,
Hmm.
44 pages, 45
Yeah.
pages or so.
Mhm.
So
Yeah. Or
how do you limit your, like, at some point, where do you say, like, okay, this is enough? So yeah, just take me through. I'm all ears.
Well, I mean, just to quickly answer that part, that had a lot more to do with like budget scope and stuff. But I mean, no, but I'll get to that.
Encyclopedia one day, I
But
guess.
sure, sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. To really backtrack, I graduated with honors from Leeward, and one of the honors department members was that same professor I mentioned earlier, that in women's studies, Professor Jane Bopp, and she really encouraged me to be in honors, and so I listened to her, and so I did, and that inspired me to be in honors at Manoa, which was, I would say, not challenging or not rigorous to I don't, I mean, it is challenging in a good way, but I'm talking about the actual acceptance. It was intimidating for me coming from community college and trying to enter this program and hearing about it and hearing, oh, you're gonna have to do a capstone, you're gonna have to do a senior project. I didn't know anything about that. Again, 3 years ago I was just beekeeping, like I didn't know about any of that. Like I didn't. And but I learned, and I kind of at first was just excited for the opportunity. I knew I was possibly interested in grad school. I knew it was something that I could be working towards. So I knew that honors status would look good in applications in that regard. And yeah, so I originally thought I was going to go to school for social work. It's I think that the work I do now with Love Pono is social service work, or social work in the sense where it's social work, but not social work. And so that's kind of where that interest stemmed. Like, how do I keep helping people? How do I give back? But then, as I'm starting to look through the program, I'm realizing I don't want to be a social worker. Like, I want to be a social worker, but I don't want to be a social worker. I don't want to work in social work necessarily. It's a great profession, but it's not necessarily what I want to do. I don't want to be like a social worker. I want my career to be a little more broad than that, in many senses. Although I'm sure social work career can be broad, but there was different avenues I wanted to explore versus just through like social work programs. And so I just kind of had this epiphany, and I was like, you know what? I've loved the two women, gender, and sexuality studies classes I've taken so far. I think I claim to be a feminist. I'm queer. Like, I want to learn more about this part of not only me but my passions that are so important to me. And so I said, I'm going to do women's gender sexuality studies, and I'm aware that some people would think there's stigmas to that degree, but this degree is so broad, and I've learned so much, not only about women, gender, sexuality, but about Hawaiian culture. It's just the things that are actually implemented into each program, at Manoa, and at Leeward, just some really excellent, um, research-heavy topics and courses and professors. It's expanded my knowledge in so many ways, and I'm so grateful for that. Um, Ye- Let me make sure. Am I answering your question, Jose? I'm so sorry.
Yeah, yeah, no, no. It just
Oh, the honors
so
program. Excuse me.
yeah,
Excuse me.
the
The,
honors
the
program
honors
was
program.
why
Yeah.
the vision, you were
Yeah. My apologies.
basically
Yes.
your
So
faculty there.
yeah.
Yeah.
So with the honors program, you have to do an honors thesis that's directly related to your degree. And so that's what I was getting at is I was trying to incorporate how can I really show folks that this degree, I mean, I don't have to prove it to myself. I already know it's important, but how do I get this platform of like honors, call it prestige. So on one end, some would call it prestige, right? But some would say, hey, maybe this is intimidating or even just a little, maybe too fancy, like how do I sort of disrupt that with what I'm doing? And I think that's what a lot of, change where a lot of change stems from, especially in regards to social justice and just social issues in general, is a disruption. So I said, how do I turn this opportunity into a disruption? Let me switch it up a little bit. Let me not just do the typical project where I do this long paper or anything. Wouldn't it be cool to actually print, not just online, a poetry journal with underrepresented voices, that the goal was to get folks who had attended UH at least at one point, sort of in my proposal, if you will. Um, and how do I, get these underrepresented voices, these stories that maybe have stigmas attached to them? How do we get those out there in an educational platform, an educational aspect, and say, hey, n now these are the voices you have to listen to, because when you're on this journey, this honors project journey, there's many presentations involved. There's many folks that are high up in the different aspects of UH that are going to listen to this project, that are going to see this project. So how do I make sure that if I do have that opportunity to project underrepresented voices, to project marginalized communities, to project stigmatized stories, and I figured this was the best way to do it and open up a opportunity for folks to contribute to me, their words, their poetry, their stories, and see how they fit into this anthology. And yeah, I did a very simple campaign. I did social media, but I also did a lot of flyers all around Honolulu, all around Hawaii Island, physical flyers. And, it's been important to have physical, tangible aspects to this, because it's something that is there forever. And I guess oh gosh, I should have mentioned this a while ago, but part of my inspiration was a publication in the 90s called La'i La'i. And it was only, I think, published once. It was from the UH Manoa Women's Center. That was I I remember a couple years ago thinking, what do I want to do with this honors project? And just looking through I think I had the thought while I was looking through my bookshelf, and I pulled this book out, and I think I had got this book at a I know I got this book at like a thrift store, I think like in 2016 in like Kona, like Kailua Kona. And I actually, this is maybe for another podcast, but I used to host a poetry event in Naalehu. So I've always had an interest in like community gatherings, poetry. I've always liked writing. So I have a lot of poetry books. And this was one that I put out during a poetry event. I always had poetry books out for folks if they didn't want to read their own writing, they want to read someone else's, if they just to inspire them. So I have a lot of poetry books because of that and just because of my general interest. And I remember pulling this out and seeing it was done by UH Manoa Women's Center and thinking, oh, that's hilarious. I had no idea it was even done by UH Manoa Women's Center. I just thought it was a poetry book I had got. And then it just clicked. I said, I want to do something like this. I want to do something that somebody can open in 15 years, resonate with, and then find a way to include that in their passions or just be a part of their life and something there forever, especially for the writers involved. That's been fun too. A few of our writers are well accomplished. I would say most are definitely well accomplished, but a few are published and have gotten their work out there. But a few have not have ever gotten their work out there. So this was an opportunity to really, get folks inspired and hopefully inspire other folks in the process.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. And so I know you talked about like budget being part of the
Thank you
reason
for saying
why.
that, because I should say shout out to you, Rob, because I wouldn't have been able to do this without the
Yeah.
undergraduate and research opportunity project. They have, funded for the most part the printing of this book. So thank you, Rob. And I encourage anybody who's in a similar situation with undergraduate research work with the honors program to apply for funding. You never know. I did not think I was going to get it. I was like, there's no way they're gonna want to do this little gay poetry book. Like what? They're gonna be like, what? Like we're trying to fund like research into science. We're trying to, figure out how this cures this disease. And I just kind of thought that's what I was up against. But I remember, yeah, I remember getting the acceptance and receiving the funds. and it was such a good feeling. So I always encourage other folks to not sell themselves short and apply for every opportunity possible, especially if you are doing this kind of work, if you are working in social services, if you are working in a women centric publication, anything like that that really projects a voice that maybe isn't the dominant, still do it. Fight for it, because I mean it's such a good feeling when you're given that that space and you're given that opportunity to really project what you want to. You really kind of see the importance behind it even more. You already knew it was important, but you're getting confirmation from other people, hey, this could be great, let's do this. So I encourage everyone to do that. I
Thank
just
you.
wanted to give a shout out to you, Rob.
No,
Sorry.
no, thank you. Thank you. No, that's great. Um, I imagine you were probably also one of the few, they're like, oh, this is original. So
Yeah,
I'm,
that I had that going for me,
yeah,
for better or for worse. So I
yes.
was just
Yeah, yeah, no, that's great. Thank
I
you.
was just crossing my fingers.
So from going back to balancing, how did
Mhm.
you navigate balancing diverse voices and experiences now within like queer feminism while still ensuring cohesion throughout the collection?
Sure. I think I don't know if I want to call it a struggle necessarily because woe is me, but something that's always come up since I've been here is again, I've pointed to it many times. I'm not native. I am a settler. I want to be really cautious how I step. I don't want to do the wrong thing. But if I do, I accept that and I want to learn how to do better. And so that's been a really big process into, creating this book too, because I want to have native voices. I want to have women voices, two things I'm not. So how do I make sure that's represented well? How do I, include feedback from or maybe research from various other publications and feedback from community members. That's been important to me. So I've just tried to kind of take that approach the whole time, just be really I'm trying to be humble and trying to just be very like open, as I should be. And just um again, if I do make a mistake, trying to correct it, trying to, learn from it. That's why it's been a wonderful journey this entire process, the many aspects that go into it, because it's not just the book. I'm going to have to do a presentation. I have multiple papers about this book. I've learned a lot about how we can approach these community efforts and how we can be inclusive, but not appropriating at the same time, right? And I probably haven't got it perfect the entire time. But I think the mindset you're going into it with is really important. Intention matters. So hopefully that answered that.
No, thank you. Thank you. This is all really great for you will inspire others to similar as though you were inspired by that women's center journal.
Yeah,
I
yeah, yeah,
feel like
yeah.
I wanted to end up on some bookshelf somewhere where somebody discovers it.
Sure. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Or give somebody that chance to be in that book, like
Yeah.
that's honestly what more so important to me, like just kind of having that out there because I believe the Women's Gender Sexuality Studies department was a thing, but I think it was just a certificate at that point. So just seeing the evolution, seeing that, the women's it was the women's center, but there wasn't an LGBTQ center at that moment. There wasn't the undergraduate degree for women's gender and sexuality studies. I'm led to believe that this publication was part of what got us to where we are today. So how can I be a part of something that will get us to where we're going next?
No, thank you. In your view, how does flows contribute to a larger dialogue around queer feminism? Are there themes or ideas that the anthology tackles in a fresh way?
I would say I'm really proud. I mean, I'm really proud of all my contributors, but I'm especially grateful that I've had some really brave contributors share about journeys of abuse, journeys of assault, really tough things, putting that platform out there. I think for anybody, queer or not, that's a good conversation to have and a good door to open and again take away these stigmas. But with the queer community, like everything, it's just even more stigmatized. So starting these conversations, I think is helpful to my community as the queer community. I think the more we put these these stories out there and tackle them, the more we're gonna like the more these things are gonna stop, and the more trauma is gonna start getting healed, and the more we'll start really seeing processes of change. So hopefully I can contribute. That's the goal. I don't want to talk myself up, but that's the goal.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. How do you how do you see poetry influencing or reflecting larger political or social movements within queer feminism?
Gosh, in so many ways. I mean, just like any expression or art, I think is just a way to really get a message across that um for some, wouldn't be able to receive it at least as well without this expression or without this art. So I think in a political landscape, in a social landscape, however you want to look at it, I think just representation matters in a lot of ways, and just like
Yeah.
kind of having being out there to represent us, I think is just really important. And I think poetry is a fabulous way to do it. I think my version of poetry is super broad. I would say most of my contributors are very structured in poetry, which is amazing, and I appreciate that too, and I love it. But when I say poetry, I'm including music and not just with words. I think the sound of drums can be very poetic. Excuse me. I think the sound of the wind against the leaves can be very poetic. I think when I envision poetry and I talk about poetry, I'm talking about this like broad sense of being that is within all of us. And so I think that that's, how we can learn from it is kind of thinking outside the pages, outside the context, outside the cover, outside that last word, right? How does that last with us, and what do we do with that? How did it change us, and how can we help change others? So hopefully that answered that.
No, thank you. So as a writer yourself, since you alluded to this and you do share some of your writing
Hmm.
inflows, do you have any advice for,
Hmm.
you know, young, interested writers to find their voice in poetry?
Yeah, put yourself out there, I mean, I'll always say, I mean, yes, I enjoy writing and I am a writer, but I've found, and this is why I'm, curating this book. I'm more of a curator, that's why I did a poetry event. I like to bring people together. I like to, make communities essentially. So as much as I am a writer, I think I'm more of a curator. But so I guess my advice would be to find people like me and find people who want to project your voice, because there are people out there, and it's not going to happen unless you do put yourself out there, put your voice out there. Know your worth, know your importance, know how crucial your story is. Even just to you, just going back to what we said earlier, when you're sharing things that happen to you, you're reframing them, and you're controlling your narrative. And I think, yeah, I think for any writer, control your narrative, because that's you have that in your control. Like own it.
No, thank you. Thank you so much. Just a few more questions I have here. I love how I had a question about how higher ed plays in creating inclusive spaces for the LGBTQ for students, and I just
Yeah,
realized, well, this anthology is one of the answers in itself. But I don't
yeah,
know if
for
there's
sure.
anything else you wanted to add to what role do you think higher education plays in creating inclusive spaces for the community?
Sure. I'm really grateful you asked this, and I'm going to go back to kind of again my story of what I was talking about earlier. When I first went to college, when I was 18, I was still dealing with a lot of trauma. I hadn't quite processed what had happened to me with sexual assault. It was actually the perpetrator was within the church system, so again, I was feeling very discouraged by any institution, let alone schools, and I didn't have the right resources. Now, being in my 30s, again, working with student life at Leeward, I've realized what resources can be available, and how we can use how educators and how administrators and advisors can use their role to advocate for people. And yeah, unfortunately, I didn't have that when I was 18. But again, it's not woe is me. It's not I can't believe that that resource wasn't available for me. But knowing that that resource can be available, I think that answers your question. That's how we can create these safe spaces. It's needed. It's not going to be everywhere. Not everyone's going to be interested in this type of work in advocacy and in education in general. Like, so that's why it's even more important because knowing that going into it, I'm speaking to advisors, I'm speaking to higher administration, higher education officials, and faculty. I'm speaking to you right now. If you do think that's a role that you can adopt, do it because not everyone has that thought. So be there for the folks you think that need to be pulled in and advocated for. Um, because I mean, again, I didn't have that, the path I went down wasn't ideal for a while, and I eventually got that. And yeah, I was close to 30, but it showed me what these educational spaces were capable of. So, kind of like with the writing, don't sell yourself short. If you have a passion for something, be there. Because again, the person next to you may not have that same passion. So it may be your job at that point, to like actually be that space for somebody.
No, thank you. Thank you. So looking ahead, what are your, I know you shared probably a little, but for folks here, what are your long-term career goals? How do you see your work influencing both the education system, the environmental movements in Hawaii or beyond?
Yeah, so excuse me. I am, through a few more months in my undergrad. I think yesterday I was counting the weeks, like 13 weeks or something, so that's weird. Um, I have been in the process of applying for different graduate school programs, some possibly on Oahu, um, but most on the mainland are the ones I'm applying for. My two interests, the two programs that are interested in are either higher education or education in some capacity, but higher education and student affairs or criminal justice. Two very different career paths, one would think. For me, I find the way they intersect every day. Again, being a survivor, working in violence prevention, um, especially in a campus setting. I see this need for these conversations in many aspects. Again, if I was going to work in higher education, I would probably want to take on an advisor role. Um, be a part of an outreach committee similar to how I am now, but obviously more in an advisor role position. And then if I was going to maybe take more of the criminal justice route, I would do something similar, but maybe not in an educational institution, maybe in institutions that do need it, that are lacking it and are lacking accountability and sort of being a consultant or for maybe organizations like RAIN for sexual assault prevention, or organizations like the Trevor Project for LGBTQ youth, things like that. So no matter what, I kind of want to work in some sort of organizational position that, again, sort of disrupts maybe how things have been done. Let's get to the bottom of, maybe why in my experience, like why some uh officials or uh, what's the word I'm looking for? Like higher ups or excuse me, people of power. Why people of power get away with certain crimes, especially in regards to assault, abuse, really sort of uncovering that accountability aspect. So that's where I see myself being in that sort of position, um, hopefully making waves and being there for people who need it. Again, being that in higher education or being that in some sort of other institution, sort of making waves, disrupting how things are done, getting those things that have been swept under the rug and unveiling them and, showing some accountability, in many different aspects. So, I'm grateful, for the education I've gotten, and we'll see. We'll see what happens with whatever graduate program I get into. I think it's going to be a big teller of like how that path goes. But ultimately, I just want to be there for people, be that students, be that folks affected in marginalized communities or various communities. I just want to be, a liaison to help people and be able to continue to provide resources. That's just super important to me. Be an advocate, but actually be a practical advocate. I as much as just saying you're an advocate is wonderful, and going to a protest is wonderful, but and all of that. But I actually want to be behind the scenes, making sure people are heard.
No, thank you. And just thank you for everything that you've done, you continue to do, and everything you will continue to do, not just for others, but also for
You,
yourself
you
as you
Jose.
find ways. I just kind of today's discussion just shed light on such complexities and the beauties of various topics. I appreciate your inspiring journey, your deep commitment to social change, sustainable agriculture, and community building, and in so many different ways, finding ways to build community. It's clear that you have a passion that it's not just for academic pursuits, but it's truly a call to action, whether you're advocating for marginalized voices or creating spaces for dialogue. There's definitely a profound sense of purpose that drives the work that you're doing. And I think wherever is the next steps that you go on, they will be more than lucky to have you there. So, thank you for also just showing how interconnected all these issues are, from gender, sexual equality to environmental sustainability. And I think that's what I truly have enjoyed about today's conversation, because we tend to get so stuck in like, oh no, it's just this field, it's just this one topic, and
Hmm.
don't see how so much of life can be so interconnected if we just step outside the box a little.
Hmm.
So thank you. Thank you for, that reminder of how essential things need to be, and how, as we look into our own lived experience, how that lived experience can truly um, lift other voices along the way. So thank you for continuing to do that. So yeah, thank you for your time today. Greatly appreciate you. And
Yeah, thank
as always,
you.
I know we'll have more conversations,
Yeah.
all in due time.
Only some
Yes,
are recorded though. And that's why
yes,
this
yeah,
always just flows so naturally whenever we get together because we're
yes,
already talking for like an hour and a half before that. We're already like ready. We're geared up,
yes.
So, yeah,
Cool.
so
Thank you again,
thank
Alex.
you.
Greatly appreciate you. Thanks everyone for tuning in.
Thanks everybody.
Till next time. Take care.
Bye.